As most of you know, Peter Darbee is the chairman and CEO of PG&E. It's one of the nation's largest combined electric and national gas utilities. PG&E serves 15 million people in Northern and Southern California, and that amounts to 1 out of 20 Americans. He's been a prominent advocate for national and state efforts to dramatically improve America's energy efficiency. He's been a champion for environmental leadership. A few years ago, he was really one of the first CEOs of a major company to come out publicly and state that global warming poses a real threat, and the time to address it is now. And since then, he's been a leading voice calling for action to cut greenhouse gases. And as a result, PG&E became the only utility to support California's Global Warming Solutions Act. At the federal level, he helped bring together the CEOs of some of the world's largest companies and top environmental groups to form the U.S.'s Climate Action Partnership. In fact, last week he was just in Washington to announce a new blueprint for legislative action on climate change, and he testified on this before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And as he'll tell you, and I think we'll talk about, he's done these things not only because they're the right thing to do, but because it's what his customers want. The past few years, PG&E's customer satisfaction rating, a key barometer in the utility industry, has risen impressively from the 4th quartile to the 1st quartile, and it represents just how far PG&E has come from the days of the California energy crisis, when Peter helped steer the company through, as the CFO. So please join me in welcoming the chairman and CEO of PG&E, Peter Darbee.
And it's great to be here with all of you. When I stepped into the job as CEO of really a PG&E Corporation, I undertook a process of due diligence, as most CEOs do. And I posed the question, I said, where do we stand on the question of climate change? The company has had for many years a portion of it, a vein that is very environmentally oriented. But its leadership hasn't always been that way. And the response that came back is that we have no official position on the question of climate change, and the previous CEO and CEOs would not permit us to do so. And so I started asking questions both of myself and people around me, and I said the first thing was, I observed that utilities emit 40% of the CO2 in today's economy in the United States and pretty much across the world. Right. So we are the largest emitter. And then I observed that Pacific Gas and Electric Company is the largest utility in the United States. Serves more customers than any other utility. It's 15 million, not 50 million. Our aspiration will be one day maybe 50 million. But in any event, what I said to myself was, first, do you, Peter, have a moral obligation to get to the bottom of the question of, do the emissions from PG&E and other utilities have an impact on the climate, and could that be very detrimental to the environment and to the world? Right. And the answer that I came to as an individual is I said, absolutely yes. The second question I asked is, as a CEO of a company with 35 billion in assets, 20,000 people, do I have an obligation to our shareholders to come to a point of view on this? Because if in fact there was a problem, then we could be faced down the road in the position of tobacco companies, for example, and other companies. And so I came to the conclusion that just looking at it from the standpoint of protecting our shareholders, I had a fiduciary obligation as a CEO to address that question. And if I concluded yes, then what I wanted to do was position the company so it was among the cleanest and most diligent utilities in the world, rather than the worst. So from that, we undertook an extraordinary process, which, interestingly, it's commonsensical, but other companies in the United States haven't done. And that was, we called together the greatest experts in the world, both pro and con on this issue. And I got my 20 top people in the company, and I said, we want to live the values of the company. We want to have a direct and respectful debate and discussion with these guys, but we're going to ask them the hard questions. We're going to get at this issue, and we're going to come to a conclusion. Is climate change a problem or not? And what we found was that the division on this issue, which was much more stark than we thought. A lot of people said, well, the science is divided. Well, it's not really divided very much. It's more like 100 to 1, or, certainly very substantially divided. And out of that came to that conclusion that the earth is warming, mankind's responsible, and the need for action is now, which today seems almost, boring and uninteresting. But at that time, when we came out and articulated that at different forums, people said, my God, have I just heard what I heard from a CEO of a major company? And what has happened is because of the solid nature of that foundation, we've been able to be such a leader with people like Jeff Immelt and others who, frankly, at the time were behind on the issue and didn't have the scientific foundation that we were provided.
So, I think our audience here may have a bit of a skewed view on some of our utility leadership. Last year we had Jim Rogers, Jeff Sturba. This year we have you. Talk about, we know the kind of leadership you're providing, but talk about your industry as a whole. I mean, what kind of leadership do you think we're going to see from the utility industry, and how will utilities like yours compete on that basis?
Well, if I go back years, when I joined investment banking in 1984, we used to look at the executives that we dealt with, and the smartest and best bankers dealt with the high-tech guys, and then the GE industrialists, and at the bottom was sort of telecom, and then below them were electric utilities. So, I entered one step up from the bottom in terms of the least exciting area to cover. And what was interesting is, starting in 1984 and beyond, we had a revolution in telecom, and it became the area where people really wanted to work. I see the opportunity, much as you described here in your earlier conversation, where this is a revolution and it's changing. But it's important to keep in mind that electric utility companies, people, and executives have frankly been some of the most risk-averse, slow-moving, least ready for change of any executives you could find in America. And I have to say, in the last 2 and 3 years dealing with that group through different organizations, it's been entirely frustrating and challenging. But the good news is just recently the Edison Electric Institute came out and stepped in front by a day with an announcement of what several hundred utilities in the United States had agreed to, and that is that we need climate action legislation, and we had a whole format that we could lay out. But I think the message for all of you is there's going to be a wide spectrum of people. And the people you just mentioned, together with people like John Rowe at Exelon and Ralph Izzo at Public Service Enterprises in New Jersey, they're at the leading edge. But behind them is a very wide spectrum of utility execs, and many of which will be dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century to deal with this.